Hello. Well, this video is taking a while to get out because I tried to record this earlier and it didn't really work out the way I wanted to. So, as far as last night, what I read about slavery, I renamed it to what slavery was and what slavery was not. Thank you. Hello. Just anywhere you want, Herb. Hello. Now, I'm going to read to you the Roman Catholic's contribution to America. Their contribution of killing one of the two of the presidents of the United States, the Jesuits, Lincoln and Kennedy. That's what it contributed. A lot of other things too. And it was well known, widely known back then, Lincoln's time. But anyway, with Kennedy, they probably have a lot to do with it. Let's see here. I'll read it to you out of course, the book, How Satan Turned America Against God. It's the second thing used by Satan, by the devilish forces, to use man to upset the things of God for this country, to be a haven for the Jews. But anyway, let's read it here. It's called The Roman Catholic Immigration. And this again is by Bill Grady, William P. Grady, and a lot of things that might say that might offend you are not my views, they're his views that he wrote in this book. So don't get all mad at me and, how dare you, whatever, But anyway, I'm just going to read to you what he wrote here. And this is not going to be very long, but I think it's not anyway. It's just, not very long, I don't think. Okay, so let's see here. Satan's next major assault on America occurred when corrupt government officials adopted an ideological alliance with the Vatican, resulting in unprecedented waves of Roman Catholic immigrants. As discussed in the previous section on slavery, the average American knows almost nothing about the early history of this country. It's a Mandela effect. For instance, the use of Poe's The Pupils of Our Nation's Ritalin dens could identify the 5 politically incorrect distinctives that the founding fathers had in common. Would it be a hate crime to inform them that they were all white, Protestant, straight, adult males? The television reveals who is running the country in the 21st century: blacks, Catholics, sodomites, children, and women. Again, that's what he said. Now, there are a lot of good Catholics out there, good, friendly Catholics. There are a lot of nice, good and friendly black people, and, a lot of nice homosexuals people out there, and a lot of nice, whoever, and the LGBT, but they're good people, but they just misguided, But anyway, that doesn't mean just because they're that way, we should hate people like that. That's just wrong. The television reveals okay, I read that. Blacks, Catholics, sodomites, children, and women. Basically, that's it. I heard once an old-time preacher say about Mike that Mike Jackson, that is, miss something. That's why our youth worship pedophiles like Michael Jackson. I don't think he was really a pedophile. I mean, the children would be afraid of him, kind of, but, who knows. Let's see here. I once heard an old-time preacher say about Mike, that America is the only nation on earth where a poor black boy from Gary, Indiana, can grow up to be a rich white woman in Los Angeles. Another Jackson who is currently undermining what is left of America is a religious charlatan and confessed adulterer, Jesse Jackson. According to Reverend Jackson, as quoted in Celebrating Kwanzaa, America is not like a blanket, one piece of unbroken cloth The same color, the same texture, and the same size. America is more like a quilt. Many patches, many pieces, many colors, many sizes, all woven and held together by a common thread. Even in our fractured state, all of us count and all of us fit in somewhere. Okay. It is my opinion as a free American that Reverend Jackson's integrity is in a fractured state. See Shakespeare exposing the real Jesse Shakedown exposing the real Jesse Jackson by Kenneth Timmerman. If Jesse wants to fit in where he belongs, let him start with a Cook County jail. The common thread that has been holding Jackson's mongrelized quilt together is a threefold cord, Ecclesiastes 4:2, consisting of patriots, blood, workers, taxes, Christians' prayers, none of which have anything to do with rainbow coalitions and Kwanzaa festivals. The men who established this country, from the Pilgrim Fathers to the Founding Fathers, were trying to get away from the Holy Fathers. The founding, once again, and this has nothing to do with hate, only literal physical survival. That's why the Puritans and Pilgrims and the Puritans came here. Conservative estimates place the number of Christian martyrs killed in cold blood by a Roman Catholic Church at 50 million. By the Roman Catholic Church at 50 million. In fact, so much blood has been shed that even Jesuit historians cannot hide it all. And even they cannot hide the adultery and the pedophilia of Ate Candy. Nope. But of course, they've been always accused of that, and they always do that kind of thing. They can only plea bargain their guilt. That's what they're doing now, with reference to the 8,800 victims consigned to the flames at Torquemada during the infamous Spanish Inquisition. The Catholic Encyclopedia concedes these figures are highly exaggerated. Most historians hold that the number of persons burnt from 1481 to 1504 was about 2,000. After his conversion, Martin Luther addressed his former vicar of Christ as the vicar of hell. On more than one occasion, the translators of the King James Bible referred to the Pope as the man of sin. Within 10 years of the Pilgrims' arrival at Plymouth, the first textbook of American history was begun by the colony's governor, William Bradford of Plymouth Plantation. Would take over 20 years to complete and now represents the primary source for information concerning our nation's early days. And Charles Goodrich is a good book too. I got that book, 1830s. When it came to realistic purpose for America's existence, Governor Bradford wasted no time in getting to the heart of the matter. What you're about to read constitutes the first sentence of the first page of the first history volume produced on American soil. It is well known to the godly and judicious how, ever since the first breaking out of the light of the gospel in our honorable nation of England, which was the first nations of whom the Lord adorned therewith after the gross darkness of popery, which had covered and overspread the Christian world, what wars and oppositions ever since Satan hath raised, maintained, and continued against the saints from time to time in one sort or another. Bradford identified the gross darkness of popery as the devil's co-defendant for evil. Can you see that this has nothing to do with hating anyone, but rather in trying to keep from getting whacked, as the Catholic Mafia says? Just as the first slaves to enter America had already arrived in Jamestown a year before the Pilgrims, then in 1620 the first Catholic settlements were also in place. From the Spaniard at Nombre de Dios in St. Augustine, Florida in 1535, to the French village on St. Croix de Mons Island on main Schuylkill River in 1604. With these beachheads established the Pope's secret service, better known as the Jesuits, crafty according to Webster's dictionary, began infiltrating the land of with pro-Vatican propaganda. This fanatical order of Roman Catholicism, officially named the Society of Jesus, how spiritual, was begun by Ignatius de Loyola between 1534 and 1539 with the purpose of reintroducing papal authority to the wayward nations of Protestantism. Protestantism. I can say it, I just can't say it right now. Lamenting a resurgence of Jesus Jesuit activity, John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1860, I am not happy about the rebirth of the Jesuits. Swarms of them will present themselves under more disguises ever taken by even a chief of the Bohemians as printers, writers, publishers, school teachers, etc. If ever an association of people deserve eternal damnation on this earth and in hell, it is the Society of the Loyal. Jefferson replied, like you, I disapprove of the restoration of the Jesuits, for it means a step backward for enlightening darkness. And we know who went to the Jesuit college, right? Bill Clinton. Historical concerns such as these moved to the founding fathers to issue one warning after another to stay clear of Catholic Europe. The thrust of President Washington's farewell address in 1796 revolved around this theme. Note the prophetic reference to Jesse Jackson's quote. Why quit our own to stand on foreign ground? Why, by intervening our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. 'Tis our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. Satan realized that he could eventually influence America to dump Washington's fuddy-duddy views on foreign alliances, UN, NATO, CETO, NAFTA, GATE, WEO, by importing a significant block of future voters. The all-important half-step to achieving foreign entanglements over there, World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Kosovo, Bosnia, Grenada, Somalia, Afghanistan, East Timor, was to start by bringing foreigners over here. A concerned Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, recommended in 1817, it may be observed that for the repose of Europe as well as of America, the European and American political systems should be kept as separate and distinct from each other as possible. The devil began his public relations campaign by attempting to convince America's business leaders that an increase in the labor pool would generate a commensurate profit margin. Foreign immigration became to be viewed as a quick fix for a greater GNP. This threatening scenario was foreseen by Thomas Jefferson, who warned his nation accordingly. The present desire in America, 1781, is to produce rapid population by as great as importation of foreigners as possible. But is this founded in policy? Are there no inconveniences to be thrown into the scale against the advantage expected from a multiplication in numbers by the importation of foreigners? Is it for the happiness of those united in society to harmonize as much as possible in matters which they must of necessity transact together? It is for the happiness. Civil government being the sole object of forming societies is administration. Its administration must be conducted by common consent. Every species of government has its specific principles. Ours perhaps is more peculiar than those of any other in the universe. It is a composition of the freest principles of the English Constitution, with others derived from natural right and natural reason. To these nothing can be more opposed than the maxims of absolute monarchies. Yet from such we are to expect the greatest number of immigrants. They will bring with them the principles of the governments they leave imbibed in their early youth, imbibed in their early youth, or if able to throw them off, it will be in exchange for an unbounded licentiousness, passing as is usual from one extreme to another. It would be a miracle were they to stop precisely at the point of temperate liberty. These principles, with their language, they will transmit to their children in proportion to their numbers. They will share with us the legislation. They will infuse into it in their spirit, warp and bias its directions, and render it as heterogeneous, incoherent, a distracted mass. I may appeal to experience for a verification of these conjectures, but if they were not certain in event, are they not possible, are they not probable, it is not safer to wait with patience for attainment of any degree of population desired or expected. Read that right, sorry. May not our government be more homogeneous, more peaceable, and more durable? He asked what would be the condition of France and 20 millions of Americans were suddenly imported into that kingdom, and adds, if it would be more turbulent, less happy, less strong, we may believe that the addition of 500,000 of foreigners would produce a similar effect here. And that's kind of the reason why I'm kind of glad Trump is doing something about that. He's not the best president in the world, but he's doing something about immigration. Having accurately predicted that Japheth and Ham would never integrate, except at the point of a bayonet, a sage of Monticello also went on record as attempting to dissuade future generations from embracing the pagan branch of Japheth's descendants, better known as your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, etc. The built-in problem with immigration was that the arriving Europeans would never be allowed to discover why they were so tired and poor. Their priests would ensure that they remain as huddled masses, beyond the reach of soul-winning Christians. The American edition of the Douay Rheims version, the official Catholic translation of the Bible in English, was published in 1837 under the auspices of Provincial Council of Baltimore, with attached admonition to prevent and remedy this abuse and to guard against error. It is judged necessary to forbid the reading of the scriptures in a vulgar language without the advice and permission of the pastors and spiritual guides whom God has appointed to govern his church. They were trying to take the true church and God and put them back in the darkness. What this means is, in the Greek, is that Father O'Reilly didn't want Mrs. McGillicuddy accidentally stumbling across Mark 6, 1-6, and freaking out at the fact that the ever Virgin Mary had at least 6 other children after Jesus was born. This is not about Catholic bashing, but rather about bashing a system that thrives on the ignorance of its devotees. As with my track record in black evangelism, I have, Brady's, I have also earned the right, this is from my first video, to speak out against the pay, pray, and obey mentality of traditional Roman Catholicism. For 22 long years, I have floundered in the darkness of popery. That's what he was first before he became Baptist preacher. In addition to attending 12 years of strict parochial school, which included a 2-year stint as an altar boy, Cardinal Francis Spellman having signed my grade school diploma, I had a macabre experience of administering the Roman Catholic sacrament of baptism to my dying Lutheran mother. When there is no time to call a priest, the church sanctions the intermediary role of the layperson to enact the deathbed conversion. Although my sprinkling job should have sent her to heaven under normal conditions, the fact that she had committed suicide led my parish priest to recommend that I hedge my bet. Good bingo strategy. by using my paper route money to purchase a few mass cards on her behalf. It is my distinct recollection of those years that the Pope was constantly represented as the undisputed authority figure for all good Catholics. This was especially true since he was the infallible. Um, the subliminal message was clear. His authority over a Catholic American surpassed that of the President, Congress, and Constitution as well. The Constitution. Don't call him. They don't call him Uno for nothing. To disregard even one of his pontifical commands was the ultimate no-no. The August 1868 edition of the Catholic World stated, "The Pope, as the head and mouthpiece of the Catholic Church, administers his discipline and issues orders to which every Catholic under pain of sin must yield obedience." In this 750-page tome entitled "Rome and the Civil Power," former Secretary of the Navy Richard Thompson wrote, "Nothing is plainer than that if the principles of the Catholic Church of Rome prevail here, our Constitution would necessarily fall. The two cannot exist together. They are in open and direct antagonism with the fundamental theory of our government and of all popular government everywhere. In the final analysis, the dictator of the Vatican State would never allow his American subjects to evaluate their local officials above his papal authority. Consequently, President Theodore Roosevelt said, we should insist that if the immigrant who comes here in good faith becomes an American and assimilates himself to us, he shall be treated on an exact equality with everyone else. For it is an outrage to discriminate against any such man because of creed, birthplace, or origin. But this is predicated upon the man's becoming in very fact an American." Didn't say white American, didn't say European American, didn't say black American, African American, it said American. Now, speaking of the nativist movement, keeping in mind that the theme of this chapter centers on deliberate satanic aggression against the United States of America, far from being an accident of history, the immigration fiasco has been proven to be a major conspiracy of the Vatican, named the St. Leopold Foundation for the Furtherance of Catholic Missions in America. The papal plot intended to undermine America's constitutional form of government by invading her shores with excess waves of European immigration. When the facts became known, over 500 books and 45 anti-popery newspapers flooded the country. The unlikely catalyst of this volatile period, known as the Nativist movement, was the esteemed inventor Samuel F.B. Morse. While traveling through Italy in 1830 and 1831, Professor Morse, a born-again Christian and son of a congregational minister, encountered several hostile ecclesiastics of the Church of Rome. One rather loquacious cardinal attempted to intimidate Morse by informing him that a Vatican machination under the cloak of a religious mission was about to be launched against the United States. Returning to his homeland in 1833, Professor Morse attempted to warn his endangered countrymen by authoring 2 books of his own, Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States and Imminent Dangers to the Free Institutions of the United States Through Foreign Immigrants. The inventor of the Morse Code sent America the following SOS. We cannot be too often reminded of the double character of the enemy who has gained foothold upon our shores. For although Popery is a religious sect and on the ground claims toleration side by side with other religious sects, yet Popery is also a political and despotic system, which we must repel as altogether incompatible with the existence of freedom. I repeat it, Popery is a political and despotic system which must be resisted by all true patriots. One such patriot was the aforementioned Richard Wigington Thompson. His 4 decades of public service included stints as acting India lieutenant governor, 2 terms in Congress, 2 years as circuit judge in the 18th district, and 4 years as Secretary of the Navy under President Rutherford Hayes. Concerning the Vatican designs on American liberties, Thompson affirmed, the papacy is now endeavoring by the most active and persistent efforts to substitute an ecclesiastical government of the people, a grand holy empire for this free and popular republic which it has cost so much blood and treasure to establish and maintain. The reality of such a conspiracy was subsequently confirmed by a dramatic shift in the nation's census statistics. By 1830, there were only 318,000 Roman Catholics in America, compared to a total population of 12,866,020. Just 15 years later, over 100,000 immigrants were arriving annually. Within 2 years' time, that figure was doubled. By 1850, the number of foreigners entering the country was 300,000 per year, impressing 500,000 per annum after that. On the eve of the Civil War, the total number of American Catholics had ballooned to 3,103,000, or roughly 10% of the nation's entire population. In just 8 more years, the figure would exceed 5 million, whereas a mere 200 Catholic churches had existed in 1830. Within 3 decades, over 2,400 Baalite temples permeated the land of the Pilgrim's Pride. Overnight, the character of America experienced a disgraceful downward spiral. Drunkenness, pauperism, immorality, lawlessness, and political corruption became the staples of society. A host of new words such as paddy wagon, racketeering, mafia entered the nation's vocabulary. Roman Catholics were encouraged to fulfill the lust of their flesh through the convenient man-made doctrine of auricular confession. The only catch was that the sinner had to perform a penance before his transgression could be removed. My penance was usually having to recite any number of Our Fathers and our Hail Marys, Gray says. Don't do the crime if you can't pay the time. You can't do the time, etc. However, in previous centuries, and especially back in the old country, the church offered some pretty outlandish scams to wipe the slate clean. One of the more inane examples was cited by noted historian John T. Christian in his work, Americanism or Romanism, which a book of rates was published and publicly sold in its fixed tax for all manner of uncleanness and debauchery. Yes, I was going to skip down a little bit and show you what you had to pay when you did something wrong. Robbing a church, $2.25. Simony, $2.25. Perjury in lying, $2. Robbery was $3. Burning a house, $2.75. Eating meat in Lent, $2.75. Killing a layman, $1.75. Striking a priest, $2.75. Procuring an abortion, $1.50. But they encourage marrying on a $10. Adultery committed by a priest with nuns and others, $10. Absolution of all crimes together, $12. You see how that does not make sense? It's just ridiculous. The inevitable backlash of a Papist Protestant Nabonidist coalition in an orderly enough fashion was via public forums, literature distribution, and the ballot box. However, in what is undoubtedly the most concealed period of U.S. history, Catholic snipers, bombings, and mob violence would set the pace for 30 years of Belfast-style religious riots in America's largest city. Much of the attack was centered against the King James Bible. Should we be surprised? And this is very interesting. In 1844, 31 public schools in New York City succumbed to Catholic pressure by abandoning their policy of daily Bible reading in class. And when politicians could not be bought, matches could. A Catholic priest in Caribou, New York, um, Carbio, New York, shocked the nation by publicly burning a pile of 42 King James Bibles. Almost all as deplorable was the editorial in the Freeman's Journal, the official publication for the Archdiocese of New York, to burn or otherwise destroy a spurious or corrupt copy of the Bible, whose circulators would tend to disseminate erroneous principles of faith and morals we hold to be an exact, not only justifiable but praiseworthy. However, the most outrageous episode of all occurred in 1850 when Archbishop John Hughes in New York, the nation's leading Vatican spokesman, publicly acknowledged that a conspiracy to subjugate free Americans did exist after all. In a message delivered by Hughes to his own cathedral that November, entitled The Decline of Protestantism and Its Causes, the religious gangster declared, "There is," he said, "no secret about this. The object we hope to accomplish in time is to convert all pagan nations and all Protestant nations, even England, with her proud parliament imperial sovereign. There is no secrecy in all this. It is the commission of God to his church and not a human project. Protestantism pretends to have discovered a great secret. Protestantism startles our eastern borders, occasionally on the attention of the Pope with regard to the valley of the Mississippi, and dreams that it had made a wonderful discovery. Not at all. Everybody who know it, everybody should know it. Not at all. Everybody should know it. Everybody should know that we have our mission to convert the world, including the inhabitants of the United States. The people of the cities and the people of the country, the officers of the Navy, and the Marines, commander of the armies, the legislators, the Senate, the cabinet, the president, and all. Even Ray Billington, a liberal pro-Vatican author of Protestant Crusade, was at a loss to explain away such a radical disclosure. In his chapter entitled The Catholic Church Blunders, the Harvard graduate resigns himself as his readers to the obvious. Protestants who have for years disregarded the warnings of Morris and his followers and the ravings of fanatical alarmists now heard and acknowledged church leader freely admitting that a Romish plot did exist. The Pope did rather intend to move them to the Mississippi Valley. He did seek to subjugate free America. The Catholic priest went berserk. In the excerpt from the Shepherd of the Valley, the official journal of the Bishop of St. Louis declared, "If the Catholics ever gain a sufficient numerical majority in this country, religious freedom is at an end. So our enemies, so we believe. So our enemies say, so we believe." Hughes' own paper, the New York Freeman, brazenly announced, "No man has a right to choose his religion. This, my friend, is what hate literature is all about." After Lincoln's election, his work is good. In 1860, conditions moved from bad to worse. Despite a declared neutrality, the Holy See was secretly aiding and abetting the Confederacy. And that's why we went to the Revised Version of the Bible after the war, because of them. The goal of Rome was to divide and conquer Christian America. The whore was after the bride. The degree of which the Vatican State could affect Lincoln's war measures was astounding. Catholic citizens in the North aligned with their Southern brethren, voting Democratic, dodging or defending slavery, and by opposing Lincoln on all political fronts. Irish Federals deserted Irish Federals deserted in droves after learning that their Holy Father, Pius IX, had dispatched an official communique of support to Jefferson Davis, formally addressing him as the illustrious and honorable Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America. An English translation of the original Latin may be seen in the official naval record under the War of the Rebellion, Series 4, Volume 3, by Brigadier General Fred G. Ainsworth. When the retreating forces from Lee's debacle at Gettysburg should have been annihilated on the banks of the swollen Potomac, Lincoln's Catholic commander, General George Meade, conveniently diverted a third of his army to securing New York City during the infamous draft riots perpetrated by the rampaging Irish parishioners of Archbishop Hughes. An exasperated Lincoln could only bemoan, "Our army held the war in the hollow of their hand, and they would not close it." Events such as these led Lincoln to write in 1864, "If the American people could learn what I know of the fierce hatred of the priests of Rome against our institutions, our schools, our most sacred rights, and our so dearly bought liberties, they would drive them out as traitors." Only 2 days after the Vatican hopes for a divided America were ended by Lee's surrender at Appomattox, Lincoln's life was ended by the stealth of a Jesuit plot. At least this was the conclusion of Brigadier General Thomas M. Harris, U.S.V., one of 9 appointed officers comprising the 1865 military commission that tried and condemned the conspirators in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. These men were noted for their intellectual prowess. General Lee Wallace, for instance, would go on to author the novel Ben-Hur. Perhaps it was the temperament of the surgeon, Dr. Harris, that propelled his private investigation beyond the formal trial. It was during these later years that he was able to compare his expanded notes with those of Reverend Charles Chiquini. Although formerly a Roman Catholic priest involved in the St. Leopold conspiracy at the time of their acquaintance, Chiquini was a born-again Presbyterian pastor with over 2,000 parishioners, who had also been a longtime friend of Lincoln's. He would later write his book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, relating how he had repeatedly warned the president of his impending assassination. In 1897, The Patriot, General Harris released his own explosive volume entitled Rome's Responsibility for the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Among other, if you look it up, you see it all over. It's pasted over YouTube. Among other subjects discussed in this chapter, Harris concurs with Rome's infiltration through immigration, Reverend Chiquini's unquestionable integrity, and the Pope's letter to Jefferson Davis, which triggered a 72% desertion rate among the Irish as to the blame for the assassination itself. Harris writes, "The Jesuit plans with the utmost art and cunning, unhampered by any moral restraints, and always with the utmost secrecy, and carries out his plans in the dark. We think, however, that in this case we have succeeded in tracing him through all the devious wanderings of his dark and slimy path, and in fixing upon him the responsibility for the assassination of President Lincoln." After presenting his case, General Harris concludes, "Thus the history of this great crime reveals us Rome's responsibility for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Not as an individual man, however, much of personal hatred on the part of the Jesuits might have led him to plan for his death, but as the head of a nation they tried to destroy. In the light of his heinous assassination and the Vatican's long established track record for political intrigue, the hard-hitting general declares every citizen who is loyal to the Roman Catholic Church is an enemy to our government." Every citizen who is loyal to the Catholic Church is an enemy to our government. The material in this chapter has nothing to do with hate. It has everything to do with facts, reality, and common sense. It is about old-time American philosophies like fences make good neighbors. It is about basic survival concepts like your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. It's centered on the rule and not the misleading exception. Or most importantly, it is about um, documented truth and not how one feels about anything. That my own great grandfather was a Catholic immigrant from Ireland does not alter the fact that Catholicism has destroyed the original morality of this nation. Whereas the spiritual foundation of America had been the Holy Bible, Jesuits' agents polluted the land with Latin masses, wafer gods, confession booths, pedophilic priests, still not the way today. Statues, incense pots, idol worship, candles, rosaries, convenience, holy days, prayers for the dead, bingo parlors, Las Vegas nights, and numbers of others doctrines of devils. 1 Timothy 4:1, with reference to the King James Bible, Andrew Jackson testified from his deathbed, "That book, sir, is the rock upon which our republic rests," the Bible. However, the newly arrived Christians from Europe looked to their human, infallible Pope for marching orders in Protestant America. Someone has said that a man's theology would dictate his morality. By 1850, the immigrants constituted only 11% of the population, but 50% of the nation's 2,700 criminals. One hungry patriot declared, "America has become the sewer in which the pollution of European jails are emptied." The standard Catholic vices of alcoholism, gamble, Protestantism, etc., led to the organized crime and general civil unrest. Billington was again forced to concede. This rotting and disorder naturally alarmed many Americans. Their country, long quiet and peaceful, little house on the prairie, now seemed to teem with violence. Mob rule was displacing the ordinary force of law wherever the foreigners were centered. Almost done. Well over a century has passed since real Americans like President Jefferson and Professor Morse, Secretary Thompson, Reverend Chiquini, and General Harris sounded their clarion calls on Roman Catholicism. Were they right or were they wrong? A recent study revealed that there are 141 Roman Catholics seated in Congress, comprising the largest denomination in the legislative body, more than twice as many as the second place United Methodist told, 65, with a dozen plus Catholic governors added to these and several more in the cabinet and Supreme Court, not to mention the thousands spread out throughout the FBI, CIA, BATF, and Pentagon. Is it any wonder the independent Baptist churches continue to experience persecution at every level of government? Was Jefferson right or was he wrong when he warned that the Catholic immigrants would flood the nation with unbound licentiousness? By 1946, America's 424,224 Roman Catholics constituted the nation's largest denomination. For some strange reason, it has rarely dawned on the average American, even sad to say, on the average Christian, that the traditional mafia syndicate Cosa Nostra, etc., operate in the United States has been approximately 99% Roman Catholic in membership. Organized crime, more than any single factor, is responsible for the dope, pornography, liquor, gambling, prostitution, and political corruption that has bankrupted the moral fabric of America. Doesn't it seem just as just a little strange that one church has continued to dominate the membership rosters of the mafia families in the United States? I mean, when was the last time you ever heard of a Baptist hitman? Who do you think is responsible for the adult magazines at your local neighborhood mini mart? Of course, it should be ludicrous and unfair to imply that the majority of Roman Catholic people are tainted with these propensities. The Catholics whom I was acquainted in my youth were some of the hardest working people I've ever known. These were men and women of character and integrity. With the apostles, Paul testified. When the apostle Paul testified that he had great heaviness and constituted continued sorrow in his heart for this, kinsman according to the flesh, Romans 9:2. I am able to empathize with the burden, yet the question remains: was Jefferson right or was he wrong? If you think that this is just about hate, ask the next independent Baptist and pastor you meet about his relationship with a local planning and zoning commission. In 2004, Brother Bush was only too happy to cooperate with the Vatican's ongoing invasion of America by recommending amnesty for 8 million Roman Catholic illegal immigrants. To continue in English Press 1, this appeal was made the same month. Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore was thrown out of office for having taken the law into his own hands concerning his refusal to remove his Ten Commandments monument. Okay, so that's that. Well, I hope you got something out of that, and I'm sorry I'm reading sleepy because I am sleepy. So I'm going to go ahead and go to bed now, and the next one will be the Secret Societies. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to put a picture up here and hopefully to match up. But that's what it is. It was the Jesuits. They killed Lincoln, and they killed what's his name? Lincoln, Kennedy too. Of course they did, and they have a lot in common. Anyway, that's all for now. Found a button to close it in the stream.